Good evening, Internet. The name is Bond, Michael Bond, and it's time for part 4 of my James Bond extravaganza, where this time I will be reviewing Thunderball. Now, this is the fourth of the James Bond movies. It came right after Goldfinger. Let's start things off and I'll discuss the gadgets, my favorite part of most of the James Bond movies. This one, there really wasn't. There was gadgets, but nothing too terribly crazy. Kind of like Goldfinger, had some fairly unique stuff. This one, most of it's standard spy stuff, except for one exception. Uh, in the very beginning, there's a car that has most of the same gadgets that the one from Goldfinger had. It has a bulletproof shield and fire hoses. He uses it to basically fire hose some people. There's also the villains have a motorcycle that shoots rockets. They use it to kill somebody. There's also a gas gun that the villains use to knock. Well, actually, they use it to straight up kill a guy. There's just like a puff of smoke, and then the guy's dead. James Bond, in the very beginning, uses a rocket pack to make a death-defying escape. That was different, but rather unique and kind of funny. There's also a Geiger counter watch. There's a little device. A lot of this movie shot underwater, and James Bond gets this little device about yay big that he can use to read with underwater for about 4 or 5 minutes. He gets a watch that's a Geiger counter. He gets an underwater camera, which nothing really spy about that now, but I guess in the 60s it looks just like a normal camera, so spy. He also gets a miniature flare gun. And there's also he gives the Bond girl a camera that's a Geiger counter. The only other Bond gadget is the villain's main getaway vehicle, which I'll get into later. So yeah, there's some kind of crazy stuff. Oh, and before I forget, he also gets a small pill, which is a tracking device that he takes, and that's used to free him when he's trapped in an underwater cave. So that was probably the most like super tech thing that there was. The villain, this time the villain was kind of weak. Actually, he was really weak. The plot centers around Spectre again. Yay, Spectre. It's always good to see a movie with them in it. However, the main villain and main agent of Spectre through the movie is Spectre Agent number 2, Emilio Largo. There's not a whole lot to the guy. He has an eye patch, so he continues the firm Bond tradition of villains with some sort of physical infirmity, and that's really about it. I just kind of remember him. He's the guy with the eye patch. Oh, and he has a pool full of sharks. He likes to feed people to his sharks. Other than that, nothing really stands out about him. He's just kind of there. He serves as a good antagonist, but the most villainous thing you see is he almost tortures the Bond girl, and he was pretty specific about what he was going to do and pretty cold-blooded about it. So he definitely had the villain air to him. The Bond girl is a character known as Domino. She is the mistress of the Bond villain, and James Bond uses her as the connection and link and various stuff. She's named Domino, and she wears mostly black and white outfits throughout the movie, mostly black and white, like bathing suits. The biggest and best thing about her, as all of them are, she's an attractive woman and a fairly decent character. But the most badass thing is she's the one that takes out Largo in the end. So props to that. James Bond continues his role, or Sean Connery continues his role as James Bond, and he does a really good role in this one. On a whole, this movie honestly isn't quite as good as the last two, From Russia with Love and Goldfinger are much, much better movies. This one is about on par with Dr. No, which I guess I should tell you what the plot of the movie is. Spectre uh, does this convoluted plan where they end up stealing two atomic bombs from the UK. And then they send a note to Britain and America that if they don't give them £100 million in diamonds, they will blow up some unspecified city. You find out in the end of the movie that they were going to blow up Miami with an atomic bomb, and then still have another one left over to blow up some other city if they weren't paid. Uh, so mostly it's just about, they're just trying to make money. It's actually a pretty good plan, though really, really, really evil. I mean, this is like terrorism of a grand scale. And what kind of makes it even worse than just normal terrorism anymore is that they're only doing it for money. They don't have any ideology behind it or anything. They just pay us or we'll kill a bunch of people. Uh, you find out some more about Spectre in this movie. You see a whole about 10 or 12 numbered agents. They're doing like a business meeting with number one, who's the guy that they never show his face and he's always petting a white cat. And you also find out that Spectre seems to run amongst the rule of honor amongst thieves. They find out that one guy was embezzling. So number one electrocutes him with the guy's sitting in a chair. Number one pushes a button and the dude gets electrocuted. They also continue on the tradition of they do not tolerate failure. One guy tries to kill Bond in his hotel room. He fails. He goes back, and Largo just pushes him into the pool full of sharks, and the sharks eat him. However, they don't really hold that up with some other people that fail. So apparently, it's only the truly, truly nameless mooks that get the "you failed me for the last time" rule. Um, there aren't any henchmen in this movie either. There's goons, lots and lots of goons, but no standout henchmen like Oddjob was, or even the former secret agent guy in From Russia with Love, which was kind of disappointing, but can't have everything. All in all, the movie's pretty good. The One of the weird things about this movie, though, is it's a lot more. In the beginning, it's very, very serious, but when it gets to the end, it gets kind of silly. Actually, it gets really silly. Um, they're trying to transport the atomic bomb to Miami underwater with this like little submarine thing they got. So it's a bunch of Spectre agents in scuba gear trying to take the atomic bomb to Miami when the Coast Guard shows up and a whole bunch of guys parachute out of a plane and they're all in scuba gear too, and then they have this giant underwater battle with spear guns and knives. It looks really awesome. It's just kind of it looks kind of silly. Um, when I first watched it, I was kind of turned off a bit by it, just because. I mean, seriously, it's a bunch of guys in black scuba suits fighting a bunch of guys in orange scuba suits with spear guns, and oh my, the spear guns! They all have normal spear guns, and then some of them have like little scooter things that they're riding underwater. Those have spear guns. James Bond enters the fray at the end of it, and he kills a bunch. Just fights amongst all of them. And he has like a little backpack thing with a propeller on it that's shooting him through the water. That has spear guns on it. So all in all, it looks really good, and you can see all the action and stuff, and it's definitely different, but it was a little silly. Um, after the battle, they stop the first atomic bomb. Largo gets away, and he's trying to escape in his big yacht that he's used as his base throughout the entire movie. And while he's trying, and this shows the difference between this quality of villain and, say, Goldfinger. When Goldfinger was caught by the army, he had a backup plan. He dressed up as a general, shot at another general, got into a plane, and flew away, and James Bond had to get him. Largo, he's in a yacht being chased by a Navy destroyer and a whole bunch of other Navy boats. There's no way he could possibly get away. It was just kind of sad. He does pull off a kind of ridiculous. This is the Bond gadget for the big getaway. The enemy, he drops the back half of his boat, and it turns out the front half is actually a hydrofoil. So he outspeeds, the destroyer and stuff, and leaves that back half behind, which is still full of mooks. And they try shooting and stuff, and the destroyer just, shells it, which was kind of fun. But the front half, I mean, he's getting away, but I mean, come on, the Air Force would just follow him and blow him up. But still, James Bond manages to sneak on board the boat, and then they have the most cartoony fight you could possibly imagine. I swear it was probably filmed normal speed, but then they double the speed, where they're just doing a big fist fight melee in the cockpit of the boat. Uh, it looks kind of cool, but it's just really, really ridiculous. But it also does set up where the villain's going to kill Bond, and then he gets shot in the back by the Bond girl with a spear gun, which was cool. The movie has some good one-liners in it too, but not anywhere near as good as Goldfinger. So anyway, that's about all I have to say about Thunderball. Um, in the end, it's a pretty good movie. I'll give it a 5. Just for there's nothing really wrong with it. I highly recommend you watch it. If for nothing else, the underwater battle is definitely unique. And that's all we have for this time. Stay tuned for next time.